I'm really delighted to have you all here with us for our Coffee and Good Company. This is a series of conversations we're holding. We really wanted to talk to lots of interesting people who are doing fascinating things in the world of social and environmental impact. And it really occurred to us that it's not just us who would love to have these conversations, but probably other people would love to know the same things that we're interested in. So we thought these short half-hour sessions just to really unpick particularly what it means to run a business in the interests of all other people who are affected by a business. This kind of concept of stakeholder governance, which is a much used word now, and perhaps not as well understood as we would love it to be, and is also very emerging. People are trying different ways of bringing this concept to life. So the Coffee and Good Company series is really about sharing how people are thinking about it and learning from other organizations who are doing fantastic things to support that whole infrastructure of social business. And so today we're delighted, I've lost you, there you are, Peter. Today we're going to be talking with Peter Paul van der Veit from a GRI, Global Reporting Initiative. And we're going to talk a lot about what the world looks like from the standards point of view at the moment, which is a big element of the change that we all seek, that people are actually using standards in a way that drives change. The backdrop for this that I wanted to just make sure people are aware of is that the European Union is actually really exploring in a really, I think, pretty far-reaching and deep way what could be the way of regulating practice governance of corporates. And that is a really interesting debate. And it seems from the consultation, they're opening this up into the whole discussion of stakeholder governance. And so for us, we at B-Lab, who have really rolled out the B Corp movement, which, as you know, drives the businesses to both make performance targets, but also to change their legal articles to represent all the different interests of the stakeholders. This, for us at the EU level, is a really important kind of landmark, and we feel we have a real proof of concept to prepare the Commission to the debate. And so this is really the backdrop for this, is that we're also have launched an Interdependence coalition to drive this agenda further with the European Union, to say that stakeholder governance can work, does work, we're showing it does, and we think it is the way forward. So that's the backdrop for this conversation, and we'll be sharing links with you as we go. If you could possibly drop any questions you have in the chat as we go. If you might have questions that we don't cover, we'll do our best to get to some of them before the half hour is up. But we have got a big agenda, so I'm going to start now and welcome you. Hello, Peter Paul. There you are.
Good morning, Katie, and thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you.
Looking forward to the conversation.
Great, and us too, absolutely, very much so. Peter Paul, tell us a little bit. Global Reporting Initiative, it's a big, a well-known organization, actually nimble and small, but well-known and important. Just tell us a little bit about your role as the chief external officer there.
Excellent, thank you, Katie, and good morning to everybody on this call. Thanks for taking the time for this conversation about reporting and the role in stakeholder governance and so on. So my name is Peter Paul van der Wijs. I'm the Chief External Affairs Officer. I didn't come up with the title, for the Global Reporting Initiative based out of Amsterdam. And in that role, I am responsible for our government affairs outreach to governments, as well as outreach to capital markets, and I lead the communications department. And for those of you who don't know us too well, we are the provider of the most comprehensive and most widely used set of sustainability reporting standards. And we've been around for about 25 years. Basically triggered originally in the US as a response to the Exxon Valdez crisis.
That's interesting. Yes, so that was your history, is that you began,
Absolutely.
Yeah, by setting up, and to some extent, I think you said that reporting requirements really began almost as a kind of risk mitigation for practice, and have now really grown and changed in their role, which I think is really interesting. That the sort of the trajectory of reporting requirements has gone through quite a journey itself. Is that fair to say?
I mean, absolutely, yes. I think there were two things, Katie. On the one hand, there was, following the Exxon Valdez a genuine interest for by stakeholders to understand better certain impacts, and really the original focus was on environmental impacts. And for companies, there were the two reasons for starting this journey of sustainability reporting were indeed understanding the risks they face, so risk management on their side, and a PR exercise. Let's be really honest about it. From the public side of the reporting element was really a PR exercise to begin with, to show all the good they did. And a lot of companies do a lot of good, despite also having negative impacts potentially. So that's where it started. I think we've come a long way, as you just said.
A long way, haven't we? Yes, yeah. and many thanks to you and your colleagues' work for helping that to come a long way. Yeah. And we'll dig into that a little bit more in a minute, actually. But yeah, I was just thinking maybe actually B-Lab and the GRI have collaborated, and I think have really mapped out quite clearly how we work together, because B-Lab, as you know, also sets up performance standards for companies to abide by. And then, of course, the GRI is really looking at reporting and how those standards then are reported on. So there's a lovely complementarity, and I think that's that work and those collaborations continue to flourish as we are in a world of standards revision and rethink in a very comprehensive way.
Oh, absolutely, because the way we looked at it is it's one thing for a company to capture their impacts and report on them. It is only when they use that information to change their behavior and develop new products or engage with stakeholders that it becomes relevant. That's where we see the B-Lab methodology come in as a management tool based on very solid data, which is comparable and agreed by multi-stakeholders as being relevant. So I think I agree with you. It's absolutely complementary what we've been doing.
They work really well. And digging straight into a bit more on standards. I mean, there's so many moving parts at the moment globally, and you're probably across a lot of these, given you're a global organization. I mean, just thinking on the international side, on the EU side, in the US, what's happening in standards? Are we moving towards more, would you say more harmonization? Is that what's happening? Or are we moving towards something maybe more mandatory, or both? Or what do you feel is the real kind of big picture game that's in town that we can help shape through the discussions around standards that are going on globally at the moment?
So can I have the option all of the above?
You certainly may.
so I think what we see is to take a step back, we see an increased recognition of the need to hold companies accountable for their impacts at the UN level, at the US level, at the European Union. So geographically, you see that need. On top of that, you see a need of, for example, the financial markets to better understand impacts. To some extent, what the companies have a little bit more. The impact is more the other way around, trying to understand how climate change could impact the financial position of companies and the long-term ability to create value. So we see that demand for more accountability, and standards are an essential part of creating that common language, so the stakeholders, whether it's investors or communities or NGOs, can talk to each other and actually understand what they've been talking about. They can then have a discussion on targets and what's acceptable, but it has to start with a common set of agreed metrics and disclosures that feed that information. So if you take that as a starting point, I think what we've seen over the past, I'd say year and a half, maybe two, there is a convergence around a model that consists of two pillars. So there's the strengthened financial reporting that should include much more clearly sustainability considerations and impact of sustainability issues on the financial performance of the company. So that's one thing. And there the major initiative is run by the IFRS. On the other hand, you see, and I know we're going to talk about double materiality in a minute, but you see that there is a need for a second pillar of reporting around sustainability information at equal footing, with the same rigor and the same effort put behind it as financial materiality. That together will compromise, in our mind, a comprehensive reporting system. And the European Union is really leading that charge at the moment with their big CSRD. But I can tell you, India, Colombia, all over the world, we see a push for that second pillar being equal-footed and comparable or linked to financial reporting. And the last point you made, this is complemented with the need for mandatory. So if we talk about stakeholder governance and really make the whole world make that step change that's needed, it has to be mandatory. And the EU is going to mandate it for 50,000 companies. The UN is talking about mandating reporting. India just, and I haven't read the article, but a colleague just sent me a note this morning saying that in India, the mandating for reporting is strengthened. So we see mandatory being the way forward in that sense.
No, that's fantastic. Yes. Well, it's a pretty big agenda at the moment, isn't it? And it really could shape things. And you just touched it. Well, this is a bit more of a technical point, but for those on the line who have heard this term double materiality and sometimes find it maybe a little bit kind of unclear what it means. I mean, I think of it as sort of inside out and outside in, but maybe it's also financial and sustainable. But maybe you could just briefly say why that matters so much and what and how you would describe it really simply.
Sure, and I think there's an element, an additional element to it. So first of all, it's just like you said, it's trying to understand the impacts a company has on the world, on ESG kind of topics, so environment, social, governance, but on a whole range of topics. So really understand what are the impacts of having this organization on the world, and then as a second step, what of these impacts also have a financial impact on the company's financial health? So one thing, the additional thing I want to make, so that's actually pretty simple. So you want to understand the impact on the world and how the world impacts the company. The key point that's maybe overlooked, but the EU is pushing very hard in their proposal, and we think is absolutely crucial, and I think you from BLab will agree with this, is there is a sequencing of these two activities. You need to understand the impact on the world first,
right?
Or you can determine which one might also have a financial impact on your company as a sustainability of the company. You can't do it the other way around. You can't extrapolate from something that's financial, determine what all the other impacts on all the other stakeholders. You can do it. You can. So you have to start with understanding the impact of the world, and then you can translate and detract from that the subset that's about impact on the company.
Beautiful. That's the clearest explanation I've had as to how double materiality really fits with stakeholder governance. So thank you for that. That's super helpful. And I know actually we've got some links that we can put in the chat for those who are interested about just getting into that concept, because it is actually quite fundamental. And although it might seem that we're, thank you, Lucia, for just posting some nice chunky links in there, which I think you will find useful if you're looking at how to kind of think about this from a company point of view. So that's super helpful. Yeah, and I think this point you make about accountability is pretty key. That transparency is great, but it's got to be about what is it that we're actually being transparent about, and where does the accountability to make impact be positive lie. And I suppose that's the thing, what's at stake is one of our kind of lines on this whole debate. What's at stake, and it can be about a huge amount of livelihoods and impact on our world that we have to take into account and be accountable for. So actually just thinking with COP now 5 days away, and it's sort of all over the papers, well, certainly here, and I'm sure in all over the world. I mean, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts just with that as a kind of backdrop to what's happening in the news today and your work. Sure. Do you have any views on how this thinking can play out in COP?
Absolutely, it's fascinating to read the papers over the last couple of days, and then also from a GRI reporting, transparency, accountability mindset. But if you look at on the one side, both Greta Thunberg and Gutierrez making the same points about companies and countries need to go beyond the rhetoric. You need to start reporting. So Greta summarized it very clearly and saying we need to get past the blah blah. Gutierrez was a little bit more politically correct, but not much more politically correct. When he spoke to the youth conference in Italy, where he really pointed out that countries need to start acting. We are 20 billion short in commitments. And if you just look at from a news perspective, the announcement yesterday by the Australian Prime Minister fell short of any details. So it sounded good, it had net zero in it, but there were no clear commitments. There was no clear plan or a path on how to get there. So That's one development. And that was further corroborated today by the UNEP report that says, listen, if we're on the trajectory we're on today, we'll get to 3.7 degrees.
Yeah.
So things need to happen. Now, then there was some good news. The fifth largest pension fund, ABP, announced that they're going to get out of fossil fuel. And what was interesting about that, especially from GRI's perspective, is that part of the reason for getting out of it is that they found that they can't engage with these companies meaningful on a transition. And engagement and transparency are directly linked. So that's where I see the link. You need global standards to keep these companies and the countries accountable. We will be having a conversation at the COP with the European Union, but we've invited the IFRS also to talk about a new climate standard. Initially, the new European climate standard, which will inform ours as well, because we help co-construct those standards, that will keep get into the product much more detailed information about impact on climate and what companies are doing. So not just the data, but also how they're approaching these things.
Brilliant. And will that also contain a biodiversity element as well? Is this also on the score?
Yeah, in the sense that in parallel, we are now working with the European Union to co-construct a biodiversity standard, both under our due process as well as under the European Union process. So that standard that will come out of it will meet both criteria. So you have a global standard in GRI, which is completely aligned with the European standard, and thereby reducing the burden of companies, but also making sure that these concepts are as wide adopted as possible.
Brilliant. Yeah. So do you feel, I mean, sitting here in London, I realise this is a bit ironic, but I'm wondering whether you feel that the EU is really sort of setting the stage here and leading the debate on what should be expected of corporate behaviour as well as governmental behaviour, or do you feel actually the same wind of radical change really is being displayed in other parts of the world too?
Well, it's a two-faced answer there. I do think that the European Union is really taking a very ambitious step forward. They've made, they came up with the Green Deal, and as part of that Green Deal, a fundamental change of the entire economic system is needed, including corporate governance and reporting and taxonomy and all those stuff. So if you look at the whole portfolio of the taxonomy legislation, the due diligence corporate governance legislation, and the underpinning corporate sustainability reporting directive, you really have a very ambitious agenda. And it's quite impressive to see the amount of pressure from outside the EU specifically, and a lot through the financial community, on trying to reduce the ambition level. But if the draft climate standard they published is an indication, the ambition level remains very high. And I think it's up to BLab and us and others to make sure that they keep that ambition level.
Ambition high, absolutely.
Yeah. But in my conversation with the Parliament, I think there's definitely a desire to lead that.
Indeed, indeed. I feel that the European Parliament, and for those of you who are close or in touch with your MEPs, please do keep this pressure up, because I do think the European Parliament have driven the agenda into the Commission, and the Commissioner obviously, well, we're waiting to hear where their final thoughts will go on this particular directive that we're really focused on, which is the Sustainable Corporate Governance Directive. And we're expecting the Commission to release their thinking and their proposal. Well, Q4 2021. Well, when we're getting through Q4, so I think it should be pretty soon now. And actually, we have a question here from Heiko. Thank you, Heiko, for your question. It's for you, Peter. What is the GRI's definition or concept of sustainability that is underlying the standards? Nice philosophical question for this morning.
So our definition is related to understanding the impacts that the company has on the world, whether it's environmental, social, or governance, or however you want to split it. And then we combine that with the concept of materiality, because we also understand that companies need to focus on what they report on, but the underlying materiality definition is about understanding the company's impact on the world.
Super. In fact, and just building on that, one of the things that maybe is a question we all have is kind of, how do we know that by reporting on their impact, actually that is having impact itself. To what extent is this increasing focus on the reporting on impact helping to really drive further and further progress? Can we see any evidence that that the impact of the reporting is having such really strong long-term lasting positive effect?
Well, we have examples, and some of it is anecdotal and as a standard setter. We don't necessarily track that in detail, but what we see is take the European Commission proposal as an example. It's becoming market access requirement. So reporting is going to be, and being transparent about and accountable about your actions is going to be a requirement to access the European market, or access the Indian market. So in that sense, we see it. We see an increased demand by financial institutions for this information as part of their decision making of providing funding to organizations. So in that sense, to me, those are maybe not leading indicators, but they're indicators that reporting is important and that people are acting on what's reported.
And particularly when the investment world and the corporate world are joined up and looking at the same things, which is another of the EU's plans. Yeah, no, that makes great sense. And actually, Faryal, who is now a wonderful teammate at B-Lab Europe and former employee of GRI, she asked also, has the recent revision of the GRI Universal Standards had any new implications for reporting on stakeholder governance?
Well, it definitely will. And thank you for the question, Faryal. By further and more deeply integrating the global authoritative instruments like the UN Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights, the concept of due diligence, it will definitely help shape in the next reporting cycle the reporting on stakeholder governance, and it will help change the engagement with stakeholders. And what we see now already is that the European Union is really looking at their new universal standards as the template for their, what they call their overarching guiding standards, because this concept of the due diligence is going to be essential, not just for human rights, but also for example, environmental issues. So definitely a great step forward.
Great, yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's just a chance just to give anyone on the line a little bit of a sense of the potential breadth of the focus that the EU are looking at under this sustainable corporate governance. It really has two key elements. One is around what you call the duty of care. So who's affected by our business? And it'd be interesting to see how far they go with that, and whether future generations are really built into that, and how far we actually take that duty of care. And then the other thread that runs through that sustainable corporate governance is around due diligence. And as you were just saying, Peter Paul, that due diligence element, I think, is a bit more well known, more understood, is a little bit more kind of readily sort of adopted, and many other countries are adopting their own due diligence standards. Germany, I think, is a part of regulation. I think obviously the Dutch have the Code of Vigilance in France. So there's already different initiatives, but I think the European Union one will potentially bring these together and expand the range of considerations that would now fall under due diligence, which I think we can all welcome as well. So this is why I think we feel that what the EU are doing, and our role, and hopefully our collective role in actually making sure that we don't drop the ball, and that 27 countries come together and really do agree. We will imagine this is going to take some work from the national governments. So those of you ringing from all over Europe, please feel this is part of our citizens' agenda, because we will have we have our voice and we need to use it well. So I think this is a super important moment for collaboration across all of those organizations and networks who are thinking about this. And maybe just to say also, how can everyone get involved in, you're working with the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, is it EFRAG? I might have got well, it was EFRAG is the body that the EU have sort of set up to work on these standards, and GRI will be very involved in that. Presumably you'll be having some consultations at different stages as you produce standards?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the two main ways of engaging with our standard setting, and I really would encourage everyone to do this, is when we develop a new standard, and the same holds true for the European process, though. So it's the same idea. At the launch of the project to develop a new standard, a technical expert group is being put together. So that's all publicly announced on our website, and we push it through social media, and the EU will do the same. So you can put your name forward if you're an expert on that field. Because the idea is that we want to have representation of all stakeholders when we develop a standard. And so that's critically important, whether you're from business or academia or an NGO. We need all those views in the process. So that's one thing. Unfortunately, that's a small group, so there's no guarantee that you get in. The other part, and that's equally important, once a draft standard is developed, it is put out for public consultation. That's a 2-month period that we promote as best as we can. And all inputs are being considered. So take the time to read the proposal, add your comments to it, so it be considered. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, our standard is a reflection of the latest thinking among these 6 or 7 groups of stakeholders that we've identified in the process. So please check our website.
That would be on your website. So GRI website, I think we can also ping that in the chat. And then, well, wonderful. I mean, we're typically out of time. It is only a sort of quick coffee conversation. We could probably go on for hours. And I'm sorry, Cameron, I haven't managed to get to your question, but maybe I can post it to you afterwards, Peter, for you to follow up on.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer Cameron's question. Please share it with me. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely, excellent. And just to say, so thank you all for being with us. It's fantastic to have you here. The Interdependence Coalition is really, you just see the link on your chat. It's really a three-pronged ask, and we'd love you to get behind it, and do bring your friends, family, companies into it so that we can actually be a force to push this through. GRI website's there. We're delighted to have another guest with us on November the 10th, which will be Maria from Share Action, and we'll be posting that Eventbrite for you all to join us then. And if you would like to listen to any of our former recordings of conversations we've had in this Coffee and Good Company series, we can post that link, and you'll find them also on the Interdependence website under case studies. And it's 9 o'clock, and you've probably finished your coffee by now, and you'll be ready for the next meeting. Thank you so much to you, Peter Paul, for giving us your time and sharing all this excellent information and views with us. Thank you all to joining us. Please keep coming, keep being with us, and let's do it together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for everyone for joining.
Thank you.